If you took a survey, what do you think one of the main questions would be about God and the way he works? Welcome to Bible on the Go with Dr. Dan. Well, for me, the question I think it would be, why does God allow evil in the world? Job would have that same question. The book of Job is such a fascinating book because it's the 18th book in the Bible and it's the first of the poetic books. In fact, some people wonder how's Job actually a poetic book? Well, it's because of the verse structure in the first couple of chapters and the formal discourses and all of that. And it's a poetic narrative for sure. Now, let me just say this right now. I believe Job was a real person. If we put Job in the timeline, he would have to be in the Middle Bronze Age during the same time period that Abraham was. So therefore, this is often referred to as one of the oldest stories in history. And certainly it is a fascinating story. It's in 2 parts plus an epilogue. And so basically that first part is prologue where we find out, hey, we like Job. And this is because of Job's righteousness, which is described in the first 5 verses. He feared God and shunned evil. And he did all this righteous stuff. Well, then we find out that, again, it's very fascinating, right? So the angels come to present themselves to the Lord, and Satan also came with them, right? And he accuses God about Job. First of all, God says, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him, which is by itself really fascinating. And then Satan says, does he fear God for nothing? You have a hedge built around him. Remove that and he'll curse you to your face. And he says, fine, you can attack him, but don't kill him, right? And so then we see this multiple thing of circumstances that, and again, it's poetic, it's repeating. While he was still speaking, another servant comes. The fire of God fell from the sky and consumed everything, and I'm the only one that's left to tell you. And your kids were eating and drinking, and the house, a great wind came and blew down the house, and they all died, and I'm the only one that's left to tell you. And while he was still speaking, that pattern is repeated, and then, of course, Job is just devastated, right? Well, then we go back to this same scene, where God says, Job has not cursed me, even though you incited me against him without reason. He says, allow me to touch his skin, and he will curse you to your face. And he says, fine, you can afflict him, but don't kill him. And so the next thing you know, poor old Job's got boils from all over his body, from the top of his head to the sole of his feet. He had to scrape himself with the potsherds because it itched so bad. It's horrible. It's horrific, right? And then he's still going to trust the Lord. He's not going to accuse the Lord. Well, the counselors show up. Now, people are always criticizing these counselors, but let me tell you this. These counselors sat with Job for 7 days before they spoke anything. And then we get to part 2, which is the dialogues. And it's vast. It goes from chapter 3, verse 1 to chapter 37, verse 24. For 34 chapters, there are speeches and responses from one friend, and then Job's response, another friend, and Job's response. And here's the most mysterious thing about it. We find the friends like we're agreeing with them. You know why? Because it makes common sense. Well, that's the problem. We discover through reading the book that they and we are not able to understand God's ways. And then we get to chapter 38. God finally responds to Job in a grand, amazing, majestic way. And we see in chapter 42, Job repents. He said, I had no idea what I was talking about. And I spoke of things I didn't know about. And then we get to the epilogue, which is often touted as the Lord's rewarding. Well, the Lord does rebuke the counselors, and in effect is rebuking us for trying to understand God's ways, right? And then Job's prosperity is restored in verses 10 through 17. And it's just, this amazing story. Well, here's the thing. We use the book of Job to teach that God's people suffer when it doesn't seem like there's even a reason for it. And Job's a perfect example of it. Sometimes the the kindest, nicest people in the world go through the worst tragedies ever, and there is no way of making sense for it. We call it the world of paradox while we're in this time-bound system. Well, the hero of this story is Job, because he never accused God. He asked a lot of questions, as we would, but he never accuses God. Which brings me to an interesting verse and my favorite verse. Well, the interesting verse is in Job 2:10, when his wife says to him, while he's scraping himself with the potsherds, she says, "Why don't you just curse God and die?" And he replied, "You're talking like one of those godless women." Notice he does not call her a godless woman. He just says, "You sound like a godless woman." He says, "Should we receive what is good from God and not also what is evil?" In all this, Job did not sin by what he said. That verse will make you think for a while. Well, but my favorite verse, absolutely my favorite verse, is right after all the tragedies in Job 121 when he says this, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. May the name of the Lord be blessed." Woo! How's that for a perspective, right? The book of Job teaches us a lot in a poetic, narrative way about how to trust God even when it makes no sense. Praise God! Thanks for watching Bible on the Go with Dr. Dan. If you like these videos, one of the best things you can do is hit that button called subscribe. And don't forget, under all of my videos, there's now links to all my merch. Hoodies and coffee cups and tote bags and stickers that you can click on and tell the world about Bible on the Go with Dr. Dan. Praise God!